So we have with us this morning 4 people on the panel, and we have John Spears, who is going to be discussing the background of the project. We have Deborah Stoppello, who is with Brodart, and she will be talking about Brodart's role in the collection analysis. Marc Futterman will be from CIVICTechnologies, and Marc will be talking about the demographic research that was done and how it got incorporated into the project. And we'll wrap it up with Dianne Harmon from Joliet, who's going to tell us what Joliet did with all this information. I wanted to let you know that John Spears, for those of you who don't know him, John moves around a lot. I've been trying to track this guy the last couple years, and he began his career as a reference librarian and a branch manager at St. Louis County Library before joining the St. Charles City County Library District as the Business and Public Management Information Resource Manager. They got that on a name plaque? Amazing. He's coordinator of adult programming and manager of community branches. He returned to Illinois as the library manager of the 95th Street Library of Naperville Public Library before becoming the director of the Joliet Public Library. Then he went back to Naperville. He's the executive director now at Naperville Public Library and is moonlighting as an adult services librarian at Oswego. Way to go, Sarah. He has served on the funding task force of the Future of Illinois Library Cooperation, serves on the Rails Board, and he's on several other committees in the Library Leadership and Management Association. Deborah Stoppello is the manager of collection development for Brodart. She has for several years of public library experience before coming to Brodart. She started her library career at St. Louis County Public Library as a reference librarian before going to St. Charles City County Library District. Debbie currently manages the Brodart Collection Development Department, overseeing 10 libraries and numerous projects. Marc, going down the road. Marc Futterman is an entrepreneur. He is the president, CEO of CIVICTechnologies. Marc's background is in information technology, urban planning, real estate, strategic planning, and community consensus building methods. Marc has a master's of philosophy in urban design and regional planning from Edinburgh University in Scotland, and a Bachelor of Science in Architecture from USC. And last on the panel, Dianne Harmon. I can't imagine anybody in this room doesn't know Dianne. I've known Dianne for about 17 years, and she's been quite a mentor to me, even when she didn't know she was doing it. She's been with the Joliet Public Library for 23 years, arriving as the head of the Children's Department from the Shorewood-Troy Public Library. She became the Associate Director for Public Services in the mid-1990s, which is about the time we met, and then became Deputy Director just 2 years ago. She is currently the Executive Director of the Joliet Public Library, but we spent most of our time when Dianne became President of the Illinois Library Association a few years ago. And I had invited her to a meeting because I was upset with some of the legislative issues going on in the state, and I thought if I get her in the chair, we can talk to her, things are going to get done. Yeah, that was 7 years ago, so I've spent 7 years in the legislative committee. Thank you, Dianne. You asked. So, John, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. For those of you who are counting, 9 jobs, 5 libraries, 2 states, 13 years. One of those libraries twice. Joliet Public Library was a wonderful place for me to have my first directorship. And its tagline is connecting you to the world. On my first day when I got there and I looked at the collection though, I quickly discovered that it was connecting you to the world of the past. Joliet Public Library actually is one of the oldest libraries in the state of Illinois. It was founded in 1876, and just to give you an idea of how loyal the staff is there and the longevity of the staff, I came on in the library's 133rd year, and I was the 5th director. So I kind of shot that average, sorry. But the library, when it opened, it was just a 26,000 square foot building in downtown Joliet, and the collection was only 750 items. Over the course of time, though, as with all libraries, it grew tremendously. And in 1989, the library was actually firebombed, which destroyed most of the children's nonfiction collection. What happened, though, is as that was rebuilt, the library was expanded, and it actually tripled in size to its current square footage of about 73,000 square feet. And it now has well over 510,000 items. But for a library just 20 years ago to triple in size, as you can imagine, there were some things that came along with that. The city of Joliet is also a very interesting place. The city has really changed quite a bit over time, and it's transformed from a working class steel town to the second largest suburb of Chicago. There's been a lot of efforts for revitalization in Joliet, and I think that everyone there is hopeful that the one that's going on right now will succeed. But the downtown and the central core of the city has seen a lot of businesses flee, and it's had a real impact on how the library is used. Some of the other things that define Joliet is that it experienced incredibly rapid growth. From 2000 to 2008, it was actually the fastest growing city in the Midwest, and the 18th fastest in the nation. The population literally has doubled in a very short time. Part of that growth, though, has led to an interesting situation in Joliet, that it really is two cities. Joliet, how many of you have been there? Question and answer session, my turn. Okay, cool. Joliet, the reality is that it is two cities. There is what's known as Old Joliet, kind of the downtown and the east side, that is economically depressed, very diverse. And then there's the new part of Joliet, the western part, which is much more homogeneous and much more affluent. And those two parts of the city don't really meet, except at a river, and that's about it. The downturn that has affected all of us has hit Joliet especially hard, and the city was actually looking at one point at a $70 million deficit. That's not a deficit over time. That was a deficit in 1 year, a $70 million deficit in the city budget. And like many municipal libraries, some of that fell on the library as well. So both the city and the library over the course of the past several years have suffered severely economically, and that also has had an impact on our collection. Now the collection at Joliet has grown in a, I keep using the word interesting, but it's grown in an interesting way. Collection development there is completely decentralized. And I'm not talking a hybrid model where we say it's decentralized, I mean it is completely decentralized. That has led to its growth in what could be termed some unnatural ways. Staff interests and preferences are very overly reflected in the collection. Instead of necessarily collecting for the community, sometimes over the course of the library's growth, the collection has really been in terms of the personal whims and the beliefs and the interests of the library, of the librarians who are doing the selection. And for instance, that's led to one of the most fascinating collections of Judaic and religious materials that you'll find in any public library. It would rival most theological seminaries. Great, not exactly what the citizens of Joliet are looking for. At the same time, there's been, in the past, a very strong emphasis on building a broad collection with few duplicate titles. So some of the best sellers and some of the items that are really in high demand, we don't have multiple copies of. Instead, the decision was made to try to kind of cast the net as wide as possible. And that's led to the collection of some esoteric titles that might not necessarily meet the needs of the community as well. The collection is old. You'll see how old a little bit later. But it's a very, the collection has aged significantly, and it has an academic bent. Surprisingly enough, it's a large library, but the collection really is more of an academic collection than a public collection in some ways. And then one of the side effects of moving into a building that is 3 times the size of its predecessor is that there's a lot of shelf space there, which is great, but it doesn't exactly lead towards the necessity of a strong weeding. And so there hasn't been the need to kind of clear out parts of the collection. That's changed now. I think it's finally reached the point where it does need to be significantly weeded, which is the topic of this discussion. But at the same time, for a while, quite a while, the library's collection was allowed to grow, and not in a healthy way. It grew in a way where kind of the older materials were not cut back, not weeded, because there was room on the shelf for them. I want to give you a couple examples of what's on the shelf. These look like great titles. And I'm sure at some point they were. However, these are the publication dates. Wills, Death, and Taxes. In 1977, the estate tax started at $129,000. Not so much anymore. Current medical research for 1968 is great. There's a lot that's still to be discovered. For instance, the MRI won't be discovered for another 4 years. DNA sequencing won't exist for another 9 years. But the first successful heart transplant happened the year before. And then finally, the truth about divorce. Well, unfortunately, the truth about divorce is that if you want a no-fault divorce, hopefully you live in Oklahoma, because that is the only state in 1955 that allowed no-fault divorce. A couple more. I love this part. Commentary on the current scene of issues in American education. The issues at that point were that kindergarten was not provided in 10 states. Education for All Handicapped Children Act had not passed yet. And the main issue in 1970 was busing. The law of contracts, notes, and checks. Luckily, restricted covenants had been struck down the year before in 1948. But at the same time, if you were a woman in the South, good luck, because you would need your husband's permission to obtain a home loan. The last one, I don't even know what to say about that. I couldn't even begin to know why that was even purchased in 1923. Although the one good thing is, maybe it was the fact that Utah just celebrated its 27th birthday. I'm not going to pronounce these. The first one is a history of the Moldavian justice system written in Romanian. It is owned by 42 academic and special libraries and the Joliet Public Library. This was from OCLC WorldCat, so yeah. As you'll see from the next example, which is a checkbook on how to play chess. It is owned by 2 libraries, the Joliet Public Library and the National Library of the Czech Republic. And then finally, that last one, I have no idea what it's about. It's in Russian, and we're the only library in the world that apparently owns it. Oh wait, I can say this. You're the only library. Now, one of the other issues that the library faced that really kind of was a wake-up call for us was the circulation pattern. Like many libraries, we plateaued. And you know, there was a period of significant growth after the Black Road branch was opened. You can see that huge spike from 522,000 to 791,000. But then over the course of the next several years, circulation flatlined. And one of the things that we really realized was, you know, part of the reason, no question, is the collection. We had an inadequate collection for the community and also for the library. We were running out of shelf space. There was no question there was an over-reliance on print resources. What the people needed in terms of practical information on popular topics was not being met. Yes, if you spoke Romanian and wanted information on the Moldavian justice system, we got you covered. But practical information on popular topics, it really wasn't there to the level that it needed to be. Or, actually it was, people just couldn't find it. it was difficult to locate the current materials. It's not necessarily that they weren't there, but it shouldn't be the patron's job to weed through the materials, it's ours. They really had what I call the needle in a haystack, where the information might be there, but for the browsers, which I think is the majority of our users, they just couldn't find it. So the question that we had, and what generated this project, was how can we improve the collection? It wasn't a question anymore of necessarily buying the right materials. So what we did is we took the existing collection, working with the demographics of the community, knowing that we had limited funds and we couldn't buy our way out of this. We had to weed our way out of it. And then the staff expertise that was there, how can we take all four of those elements and really create a user-centered collection?
When John and Dianne called us, Brodart, for collection analysis. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I do. I'm the manager of collection development at Brodart. And I just want to give you a little background. We know what we're doing in collection development. I'm very proud of our department. We have over 250 plus years combined of library experience. Our department is made up of librarians who've worked in public libraries and academic libraries, in schools, in combined public schools, in special libraries. We've pretty much done it all. And we've done it at all levels. I started out as a reference librarian with John, or before John, actually, at St. Louis County, and then at St. Charles County. We've had directors of libraries. Basically, they love collection development, they love what they do, and rather than going into retirement, they'll come to us. They want to still select, they still want to be part of the public library world, as do I. We have contributions to the field of librarianship. We've had librarians sit on award committees. One of our librarians was the first ever librarian to sit on the Eisner Award Committee. One of our librarians was the 1996 official librarian of the Atlanta Olympics. We've had them write for, actually one of our librarians currently reviews for Voya. They're just everywhere public library people are, because they're public library people. And as I said, we're passionate about collection development. We love what we do. So when Dianne and John came to us and said they had a problem, we said, well, let's talk about that. We do ongoing selection, and that's, you know, continuing, that's looking towards the future. We do collection builders, and that's what we call it. If you find that there's a gap in your collection, we can give you a selection list of a certain area. You get some grant money. We can give you something to focus on that. We do lots of opening day collections. You have a new library you need to open, we can step in and help you with that. We do special collections, but we also do collection analysis, and that's where, after our discussions, we thought that's where they needed to go. So we offer 3 levels. The first one is simply a basic matching. You give us your holdings, what we create, what we call is a model collection. We look at the 2, we come up with a recommended list, and we send you that recommended list of titles to buy. The second, we do the same thing, but we give you charts and graphs so you can see how many of those Romanian titles you have, or how many of those titles that are from 1923. And we also give you, which is my favorite part, and I'll show you that later, is the color-coded Excel spreadsheets of your collection so you can sort and do whatever you want, and I'll go through that a little bit later. But that's the model collection in comparison to your own collection. And level 3 is where you get all of that, but you don't want to you don't want to have to analyze your collection. You pay us to analyze your collection, and we will do the written analysis, and we will make the recommendation. We actually have done a couple of those, and as you know, collection analysis is very time intensive, and they're a lot of fun, but they take a year or more to do. So when we started, we got on the phone and asked some questions. Why do we need a collection analysis? This is what I said to Dianne. Why do you want a collection analysis? What are you aiming to do? What are you trying to learn? What do you want to accomplish? Once you get it, how do you plan to use it? who's your community, and where do you want to focus? And we had this conversation in order to learn what it is she was going to do. She said that she wanted to, whoops, let me go back. She said, I want to learn everything about my collection. I want to learn where it's been, because I want to know how it got here. You know, why do I think it's this way, I think it's very academic, I think it's really old, but I want to understand how it got there. Maybe if I were to ask another librarian, they say, you know what, I got some grant money, and all I really want to see is where I have some gaps so I know where to focus that grant money. Or maybe I'm not interested in the past. I know we're here, I don't care how we got here, I'm really only interested in going forward. So that first question is, why do we need a collection analysis, is very important to think about. Why do I want this? What am I trying to accomplish? Am I targeting a particular collection? Am I wanting to redo an entire collection? Maybe I have a new building, an opening day collection, and I have an existing collection, and I want to see what I need to weed and take with me, and then how to go forward. There's so many reasons to have a collection analysis. Maybe I just want to make sure I've been doing the right things for the last 10 years. How do we plan to use it? And then who is our community? We're actually working with a library right now, opening day collection, huge, $1.3 million. The highest taxpayers live in that community. They also have a very poor section. They've chosen to focus on the people who pay the taxes. They're the majority of the community. They have defined their community and who they're going to focus for. And that's perfectly legitimate. Who is our community? Are we going to target a particular audience? Or maybe even it's more on a lower level. Maybe I have new people moving in, a new group of people, new businesses are open. Where we live in Pennsylvania, we have natural gas. And we have a lot of Texans and people from Wyoming coming in, and that's an entirely new user group that has just come in the past couple of years that may not have the same interests that we do in Pennsylvania. So maybe I need to define who my community is. And where do I want to focus? In this case, we focused on the adult nonfiction because thought that was the best place to start. So the process was, as we talked on the phone, and as John said, there was limited funds, we decided to do a level 1. Yes, we wanted to accomplish all of this, but the limited funds were guiding us. And we said, okay, we will take your collection, and we'll create a model, and we will send you lists. And then the rest is up to you. And so we had our conversations, and I sent her a Brodart collection analysis profile. And in that, it asked things about your collection, about your community. And then we also asked for her documents. Do you have, if you had a community analysis, wouldn't that be great? Send that to us. If you have collection development policies, anything that you already know about and how you do your collection. We need your holdings. We received them in Marc format, and we did an ISBN match against our title database. So BIBS2 is our database, and we did an ISBN match to see what the hits were. And then there's the model collection where we compared to the holdings. But then CIVICTechnologies came along, and we were talking to Marc, and he had this great thing called the snapshot study, which was able to look at Joliet in much more in depth. When we do we talk about the community with a customer based on their experience. You know your communities, their census data, but the snapshot study was able to give us such a wonderful look at the community that I had never used for collection analysis, that we said, you know what, we can't stop at level 1. We really do need to go to level 2 because we can't waste this great demographics. And I couldn't do it. It's like, you give me all this information, we've got to show you more than just selection lists. I've got to show you what your collection looks like in terms of your community. So the profile talks, we start with community analysis. And as I talked before, you define who your service community is. Maybe it is this new population that's coming in and I'm only focusing on one part of the collection. Maybe it's the entire community. I need to understand it better. And then you say, what is my role in this community? Am I there to provide a place for high schoolers? to come because we're near a high school? Am I, there for programming? Am I there for research because we are going to also support maybe the community college? I mean, what am I trying to do in this community? And then I need the community description. And then the collection management, we will ask you, it's like, what's your philosophy? And I found over the years that people know what their job, they know what they're doing, they know their community, but they haven't broken it down into parts. And I do that all the time because I work with so many libraries. And so I'll ask questions like, do you think of your branch as an individual branch? And it sounds like decentralized really is. But there are others where there might be 30 branches, but everybody thinks about it as one system, and the customers or patrons know that if it's not at my branch that's closest, I can get it to this branch. So how do you think about your, what's your philosophy of collection development? And then what's your policy? Are you a popular, high demand type of library? Are you core collection? Are you some both? And you practice trying to get those in. What is it that you say your library is supposed to be? And then what's your practice? You have your philosophy and you have your policy, but what are you actually doing? And sometimes you don't know until you've looked at the spreadsheets or looked at your collection in a different way than walking down the shelves. And then we ask for the details, your existing collection. I need to know what the description, in this case, like I said, adult nonfiction, what are we going to focus on for this collection analysis? And we did all of adult nonfiction. We divided up into Dewey Hundreds, biography and reference. Now comes the model. And I love the model because the model gives me a comparison. And it's not a shelf list. It's not something that I have to, oh, this is what I have to buy. It's a tool to analyze your existing collection. And so the model can be absolutely anything you want. It could be, what should I been buying all these years? Like I said, what's your library goals? If I'm just focusing on a particular collection, maybe it's something, I want what I should have gotten the last 5 years and going forward. It's how you want to see your collection, and so what am I supposed to compare it to see what my existing collection is? In this case, we did, Dianne and I discussed it, and she wanted to go back. I want to know how I got here, because I want to show my staff, this is where we are because. And so we decided to do it over the time span of about 20, 30 years. Actually more. I think I went back as far as I could go and still get some titles. So how did this collection build up over the course of many years to get to where it is? So I can see that. And I tried to make it comparable to the size of the existing collection. If I'm working with a library that's small, I'm not going to show them a library with a collection, a model collection with a huge budget. So then I take the profile, and this time I had the CIVICTechnologies snapshot demographics as well, and I take appropriate sources, and what we call sources are bibliographies, awards. I wanted to get some demand in there for popular reading. I took the New York Times bestsellers. I took LA Times. We have a program called McNaughton, which are all the top sellers, and I went back as far as McNaughton goes, which I think is the 1960s. I'm trying to draw titles onto this model that in the course of over many years a librarian would have chosen. And the only way I can do that is using sources or bibliographies, or some are recommended, some are not. In this case, the demand were not recommended, they were simply popular. Every other source I used was an award or a recommended bibliography. So the bibliography was something that someone in the industry, someone in the librarian field decided this is a recommended title. In other cases, I might not do that. In this case, we did. And then we got to the Joliet Public Library model. So Joliet Public Library, this is one of the charts that goes into the reporting. Of the adult 300s, 22% of the adult nonfiction is in the adult 300s. That's and this is titles, not volumes, there were 22,481 titles out of 102,706 in their adult 300s. For comparison purposes, I went back and I looked at all of our opening day collection projects and what do libraries across the country determine is appropriate in their budget for a brand new opening day collection. And that came to about 17% on average from 2007 to, and this happened starting in about May 2010. So, and then what we also do is we take the Wilson Public Library core and we count. And they were about 17%. 17% of the Wilson core is adult 300s. And then we count book list. Keep an average, 2005 to current, and they were about 19% of the titles they recommend are in the adult 300. So Joliet's pretty, kind of high. And then we look at the age of the collection. And their age, they had, well, slightly under 1% before 1970. And that's probably included your examples. 70 to 79, 8%. 80 to 89, 18%. 35% of the collection, 90 to 99, and 39% 2000 to 2010.
So did you do an overall average of what the collection was, what the average age of the collection was by combining those?
These, I actually looked at the titles.
What I'm saying is taking it all, throwing it together and saying the average age of the 300 titles is 21 years old.
No, but we could probably do that pretty easily. I could get,
Great selling point if you want to sell your board.
Okay. But as you can see, the majority of the collection is older than 10 years old, 61%. And then we wanted to show her what she was purchasing over the last 5 years. And it's pretty steady, 798 titles in 2006, jumped up to 980. So that just gives you an idea of how many titles you're buying. And this is not volumes, but titles. And it sounds like it was singles, so probably close. And this is the spreadsheet. And I'm showing it to you, this is all one line. I'm showing it to you, break it up, and then I'll go to the next slide and show you how we use it. But this is the model. The white is the model collection. The yellow is Joliet's collection, and the blue is where the ISBN match takes place. And then at these last 4 things, this is how I drew it onto the list. It's a recommended bibliography, it's an award, it got on there by demand, one of the bestseller lists, or it's an academic title. And so I grabbed, these are the 600s, some 600s, and I grabbed some titles to show you. Because this is where you can look at your entire collection, whatever you're focusing on, in any way you want, from so many different perspectives. You can sort it, just scanning by color. In this case, I can scan by color and say, look at all the matches I have with this model. That's good or not, is it good? In this case, we decided we're gonna show you how you got here. So if you look, there's a couple academic titles here. We don't want those in our collection, but they got on here because they were academic recommended titles. So once again, you have to define your model and then understand what you're looking at. But once you do that, you can really look at your collection in a new way. You can sort it by pub date. This goes back to 1992, it looks like. And there was a lot of reference in their circulating. That's a $106 title from 1998 from Wadsworth Publishing that did not match the model. So this, in the collection analysis that I've done over the years, I believe that I actually understand a library's collection simply by using these spreadsheets. You can filter it, I mean, how comfortable you are with spreadsheets, but I can look at an entire collection and scan, what if I'm seeing a lot of yellow and no white? Well, and I'll look more closely at the title and I'll say, well, that makes sense because, you know, we have this very special collection for a small group of people in our community, and I wouldn't be able to draw this in by the model, but it makes perfect sense why it's there. So you start broadly, and the more you focus and sort and look at it all in different ways, you really understand your collection. It's amazing how you will know your collection. And that's, I think, what Joliet's doing now. So taking John's existing collection with limited funds, demographics, and staff expertise, I think if you throw in the collection analysis with those limited funds, you can work your way to a user-centered collection and really make a difference for your community.
I'm not making a phone call. I'm turning on my 20-minute timer. My name is Marc Futterman. I'm from Los Angeles. Very happy to be here and tell you about the market segmentation study we did for Joliet. Can I see a quick raise of hands if anybody's even heard of market segmentation? It's good. It's good. So we're headed in the right direction. I love this quote from John Wanamaker, who really understood the challenge of understanding customers. And the approach that we take in understanding a community is based on understanding your customers from your library's point of view. We've done a lot of demographic analysis over the years, a lot of market segmentation analysis, which we started doing with libraries about 4 or 5 years ago. And we've really come to the point where we really wanted to simplify and clarify our message to public libraries, which is that libraries are great places but tend to have what we call a supply-sided model. You have a building or a website or a series of buildings with a lot of stuff in it. And you open the doors and you hope people come in and borrow the stuff. We take a much different approach, which is a demand-based approach, based on understanding what customers and prospective customers need, want, and are interested in. In using market segmentation for public libraries, we use it to help them better understand their communities, build their patron base, focus collections development and budgets, and target services and programs to people who need them, in addition to finding new customers. So what is and why do we use market segmentation? Market segmentation basically categorizes potential customers into groups based on a series of characteristics. You can read what some of those are. Ultimately, organizations like public libraries use market segmentation to gain insights into their existing customers, prospective ones as well, find potential ones with similar characteristics. So if these people are using things in our library now, can we find more like them that aren't patrons? Or can we find more like them who are not using our library? But if people like them are using our library, how can we extend our reach and increase the usage of our existing investment in resources? In the business world, that's called a sunk asset. You have a lot of sunk assets in your collections, in your resources. How do you use that more aggressively across your community? And how do you communicate more effectively using targeted, relevant messages to people so that they will hear your message, because not all people are the same? Here's an example of a real market segmentation concept. So if we take a similar person, a woman in her early 40s who's married with a household income of $125,000, and the life stage is the same for both, meaning that there are 2 kids and it's a working mom. The one on the top in blue may have a need for menu planning advice for low-fat and value-oriented food, and loves to cook, so she's in a cooking club. But she's a value shopper. Maybe she'll shop at Target or Walmart, prefers low-fat products, and enjoys cooking. The one on the bottom wants to buy ready-to-eat products, pre-cooked entrees, home grocery, and delivery services. It's a convenient shopper, prefers organic foods, probably will be shopping at Whole Foods. So my wife is really the bottom one. As a result of that, I cook more and probably fit into the blue category up there. Ultimately, what we're trying to do with market segmentation is to discern the difference between how customers appear, which in these 2 cases are the same, versus how they actually behave or act. Companies use this data all across the country. Every time you swipe your card at the supermarket to get that 10-cent discount on an item, They know exactly who you are, what your zip code is if they don't already have your street address from when you sign up, and height on the shelf so you can easily grab it based on demand for those products. So the segmentation system that we use in our process is called Tapestry. It's developed by a company called ESRI, or ESRI, which most cities and counties nationally use for their GIS, or Geographic Information System software. ESRI is the largest provider of geographic information system software and data in the world. We're a business partner of theirs, and I love their Tapestry data. I've worked with virtually all segmentation data that's out there. I find this to be the best for a number of reasons, which I won't go into right now. What they do is they combine demographic data with lifestyle information. What's really important about segmentation data that Tapestry uses, it's a traditional statistical method called cluster analysis. But what ESRI does that's kind of unique is they bring it to bear at the neighborhood level. So neighborhoods are places where people are attracted based on similarities and likenesses. And while people will come and go over time, the neighborhoods will tend to retain their character over long periods of time. So ESRI integrates geography into their cluster analysis. The segmentation system that we use in Tapestry will describe their lifestyle and life stage and urbanization pattern, their household type and marital status, demographics, socioeconomics. In fact, they use about 75 census variables of data, and then they check that against a whole series of validation models using consumer expenditure data. That itself is interesting, but that's for a different conference. So ESRI comes up with this method of classifying the entire country down to into 65 segments, down to a census block group. Now, a census block group is smaller than a tract and is a level of geography that is pretty detailed. So you can see the 65 segments that are there, and they get all sorts of funny names on them. So one of them is Green Acres, another is Midland Crowd, another is International Marketplace, and another is Boombergs. Now, the group that does this at ESRI is based in La Jolla, California, and frankly, we're not sure if they're out in the sun too much or not enough. One of my favorites is Laptops and Lattes. This is a group that's cosmopolitan and connected. They're the top market for owning Apple products. They highly use the internet from everything from news, trading investments, tracking investments, travel, booking, and buying a whole bunch of stuff. Traveling, they prefer overseas destinations like Italy, the UK, and France. Domestically, they like to gamble and go to Vegas and Atlantic City. They love to shop at Banana Republic. They like going to movies, rock concerts, nightclubs, baseball, and basketball games. They dine out a lot. I think this was me in a different life before kid. They exercise at a club, love to do yoga, ski, jog, and tennis. They love to listen to public radio and read 2 or more daily newspapers. They love to read books and magazines. If they're not a member of your library, they should be. They have a high degree of community involvement. So we know their spending habits, we know their brand preferences, we know how to communicate with them, and we know, for example, that with this group, you're not going to reach them really through advertising in print, but really through email and social marketing. Tapestry, as I mentioned, uses a variety of data sources. I'm not going to have time to go into all of these today, but can certainly do that for you. It is also, as I mentioned, neighborhood-based, so that we're looking specifically at locales. That actually happens to be Joliet. I found an aerial photo of it on Google and drew randomly circles, so those are not actually neighborhoods. Well, they may be neighborhoods, but it would be strictly accidental. Tapestry ultimately answers 4 questions. Who are my best customers? What are they like? How do we communicate with them? And where can I find more like them? For libraries, it does one more thing, which I thought of after we actually did the slideshow, so I really couldn't add it, which is, how do I find people who are not patrons of my library and get them to be patrons of my library? So we're working with libraries to do segmentation systems now. The reason it's starting to catch on now with libraries is because the cost has been brought down significantly. We've been leading the charge in that by basically commoditizing or making the segmentation data available to libraries in new and innovative ways. You can see the list of libraries on the bottom of the slide. Slide is a number of libraries that we've been working with over the last few years to deliver segmentation services in addition to Joliet. So we do this through Community Connect, which is the follow-on service to Snapshot, as well as another service called Business Decision, which is actually how John and I originally met. So we have tended to present segmentation data in Snapshot, which is what we did for Joliet. It's a brief report. It uses no library data and looks at a series of profiles, gives you an executive summary, what we call data at a glance, and a series of market, tapestry, consumer spending, and employment occupation profiles. We've also developed a service called Community Connect that we've recently launched that actually uses the library's data from your ILS, whichever one it is, and does monthly updates of patron and checkout data, matches it against the tapestry segmentation data, and actually tells you how well your library is performing with these different segments, looking at checkout and other related data. We have a number of customers, in fact 2 from right here in Illinois. Illinois is leading our customer base in our pilot launch of Community Connect with both Skokie and Arlington Heights, as well as a number of other libraries nationally. So what we found for Joliet is that there are 26 of these 65 segments are actually located in Joliet, which was a pretty big surprise to me, given 140,000 people in the 2010 current year estimate of population. That is not Census 2010 data. That's a 2010 estimate of population in 47,000 households. The top 2 segments, which I'll show you in just a moment, account for 36% of the households. So to very quickly reach 1/3 of the households, you can focus on 2 segments. It's interesting how the numbers break out here. The top 4 segments represent half of the households. So to reach half the population in Joliet means reaching 4 segments. The top 10 segments are 3/4, which means that the remaining 13 are very fragmented. 24% of the population, or just under 2% each in those segments. So really the question here is, how do you really begin to reach these different segments? Who are they? What are they like? And how do you begin to reach them? And you can begin to develop a policy approach to which segments in the population you want to target. Now, public libraries have a mission to be all things to all people, which is, of course, what keeps you awake at night. Targeting a segment doesn't mean you're not going to provide many things to all people. They can certainly still come in the building. But when you're looking for efficiency, and when you're looking for reach, and when you're looking for clarity of purpose and stretching your dollars, this is a great tool to help you do that. So here are the segments. On the bottom are the largest segment, which is called up-and-coming families. That top segment that accounts for 21.3% of the population. And Bloomberg's, which accounts for 14.7% of the population, and so forth. Up-and-coming families is described, as you can see on the chart here. This is a very quick top-level summary of the segments. We actually have single-page, full-page descriptions of each of these in narrative form. But you can see above the bar, so to speak, are basic demographic characteristics of each segment. These are up-and-coming families are married, tend to be married couples with kids in their early 30s, upper middle income, professional and management occupations. Education is mostly college and bachelor degrees, single-family homes, and mostly white. They like to eat at Chick-fil-A, have a new car loan. They're not making enough yet to own their car. They probably own a dog. They watch cable TV, and they drive 20,000 plus miles annually. Now let's compare that, for example, with retirement communities, which is 7.1% of the population, or actually households. Sorry, households. They're singles with a median age of 52.6 years. Completely different market. Middle income, professional management, same education level. They tend to live in multi-units, probably townhouses. Also white, they travel extensively, use a full-service brokerage firm. So in Joliet, if you don't have investment databases, they would, and you do have them there or want to get them, they would be the ones to be using them. They go to live theater, watch news and sports on TV, and lease a vehicle. which actually surprised me. So you can go through a number of these segments and really start to get a very detailed idea, because we actually have all that data on these people, and we actually know where they live via mapping. And so we can actually pinpoint which neighborhoods and which communities they're in. So it's a pretty powerful tool. Here are a few more of them. Industrious urban fringe is a completely different set of segments. This is 4.7% of the households. These are a family mix. 29 years old is the median age. Skilled in service, middle income, no high school diploma or high school graduate. These are living in a single family house, white and mostly Hispanic. And you can get all sorts of preference, consumer preference information on them. So when we looked at all of this data, we made some broad-based findings about Joliet. So Joliet to us personifies America. It's really a cross-section of it. In terms of age, family types, incomes, occupations and industries, education levels, races and ethnicities. But there are some very important shared characteristics here between all of that diversity. There's a slightly young, family-oriented nature to Joliet that's equally spaced from toddlers to teens. More frequently, we're finding communities because of birth rates in the United States that have higher teens than toddlers. Joliet's an exception to that, and so there's really quite a balance of kids' ages right across the community. There are a modest number of seniors. Most communities think they have more seniors than they do. Joliet has a quite modest number of them. There's a high diverse range of white-collar, blue-collar, and service occupations, and strong civic mindedness and sense of community. Now, I've never visited Joliet. I never even interviewed the library staff before we did this report purposely to see how well the data fit. And it fits very well. People enjoy the outdoors and nature, do a lot of home and vehicle improvement projects, and share similar entertainment and recreational interests. Here is the beginning of an approach to collection development. You can see the interests, you can see the orientations, you can see all sorts of information that you can begin to glean a broad-based approach to the people who live there and what their interests potentially are. And then, sorry to do this to you, I hate when people do that to me in a presentation, but I don't want to repeat the slide twice. When you're interested in a particular segment, you can dig down and get into the nitty-gritty of what their consumer preferences are. So, okay, fast. Two and a half minutes. So, in our snapshot report, we look at a number of implications for library services. What we try to do is take this information and really boil it down to a few basic themes. And one of those themes that we found applicable in Joliet is education and families. There are hardworking, dual-income families with very limited time. They value educational preparedness, and they seek to combine learning into family activities. Again, this is not from our discussions with library staff. This is from our understanding of the tapestry market segmentation concept. Don't try to read this. This does not belong in PowerPoint based on every single PowerPoint lesson I've ever had, but I had to put it in here because I didn't want to put it in bullet points. It just crucifies it. So I put it in here to say this is a level of detail we go into in the snapshot report, and is what got everybody so excited, because there is a specific way that you can begin thinking, taking that description of the segments, the broad-based findings, the implications for library service, and actually turn it into things that you can do. You know, one of the things that's always mystified us as outsiders to the library world is how you can take these PLA service responses and say, okay, let's use this one or this one or this one for my community. There's no basis for doing it until you have this kind of information, and you can begin then to intelligently apply those service responses to the specific interests, needs, and concerns in your community. Career development and financial planning is an important issue. So there are a whole series of library service implications. Lifestyle, similar recreation, social, and personal interests. And again, a whole series of these. While there are only a few retired in Joliet, there are quite a number of people of households who are nearing retirement. The kids have left home, they're still in the house, and they're going to be there for a while given the way the economy is right now. So they're nearing retirement, they're at the top of their earning power, they're going to continue working. They're probably going to put off that near retirement sometime in the future. So there are a number of things that, but they have money. So they travel, they do things, they go visit their kids, especially if the kids are up-and-coming families in another community in another place in the country. So they will go travel extensively. So there's a number of things that can be implied in terms of library services. Immigration and Americanization is another issue, which I don't have time to go into. So let me give you the last slide, because I think I have 30 seconds left. I don't, I'm over by 3 seconds. The upshot is that segmentation provides a very strong, integrated way of looking at qualitative characteristics and quantitative facts. That's one of the things I love about this. My background's in urban planning, so while I don't really have a statistical background, I have a qualitative background in understanding communities, but I love the fact that we can put data related to it, and segmentation does that in a really interesting way. So the information here is tailored to Joliet or any particular community, and that what's most important is that library staff, folks at Brodart, have a very strong basis for making decisions. If I have a single message for you in addition to the importance of market segmentation, the importance of a demand-based approach, it's that decision-making has to be based on facts. The data is there. You can use that data to make facts, and you can boil that data down into very specific decisions about your local community. And perhaps most importantly is it gets everyone in your organization and on your board on the same page. This is one of the most important things that we found in working with cities, communities, libraries throughout the nation on these kinds of things. I have presented to a huge diverse range of library boards and city councils and county commissioners. And I love doing it because I know when I get done with the presentation, I'm usually going to get a unanimous vote unless there's a distinctly political reason that they're voting against it. And these things become so apparent in those votes on policy matters that it smokes out the nasty politics that's going on in that decision-making body. And 99.9% of the time, the library ends up in a very good position as a result of that. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'll look forward to your questions if we have some time at the end. Thank you.
I've changed my presentation at least 3 times sitting there. This really started out when I became associate director in the middle 90s, and we became involved in planning a branch library. That took up most of my time for quite a while. Next year our branch will be 10 years old, and I functioned as branch manager in addition for a few years. Finally came back to the main library and started looking around at some of the things that I had kind of put down. And I knew that our nonfiction collection had problems. I started thinking that it was really a little too academic bent. I actually had patrons tell me that they preferred to go literally back to the Shorewood Troy Library where I had started, and because, oh yes, their director is in the audience, and because they didn't have so much to pick from. We had too many titles, and this was in the investment area specifically. And I started hearing those kinds of things. But it is a big job to weed a collection as large as that nonfiction collection. I mean, it's 100, I forget the exact number, Deb. It's 100, how much? Yeah, 102,000 items. And it was a little overwhelming to deal with some of the staff. It had not been systematically weeded. There was some resistance by some of the staff, We had some staff that were really eager to go, and that in itself caused some problems with staff, with some other staff. And I started feeling very, very overwhelmed, and happened to